Okay, in this episode, I wanted to go over 5 reasons that PGY-2 applicants fail. And the real problem that we have is that as a PGY-1, in many ways, you rightly think you're big stuff. You got the residency and got through the residency process, and maybe you're at the residency that you want. But PGY-2 is not just harder, it's different. And when I say harder, what I really mean is the acceptance rate to PGY-2 is actually higher. So if you get an interview, you've got about a 70% chance rather than a 60% chance of matching. So that's good. But when you're looking at PGY-2s, it's usually a lot different in terms of getting one that you really want, in terms of where it is geographically, what they offer, and those types of things. So let's look at the 5 reasons that PGY-2 applicants fail. So as I've been helping people with their letters of intent, I also help PGY-2 applicants as well. Many of them are just sending in a letter of intent for early decision, which is the easier of the two. It's a lot easier to talk to someone you know, to write to someone you know, and intuitively you're going to be smart enough to not make generalizations. You're going to say all of the things that, the people that you're working with and those types of things. But these are the 5 things that I'm seeing that are going to kind of sink your application. The first thing is past accomplishments and rotations from pharmacy school rather than PGY-1. So it's okay that maybe one of the APPEs in pharmacy school is going to fill in your knowledge base for PGY-1 as you're going on to PGY-2 if it's outside of the primary scope. So for example, if you're going to go for a pediatric PGY-2, then you should be at a children's hospital, or you should at least have one PGY-1 residency rotation in pediatrics done by December. And then you should have another one scheduled, whether it be in the NICU or PICU or something like that. But the expectation is that you will at least have some focus on that particular site. You can't go back and say, well, in pharmacy school, I did PICU and NICU. Your P4 experience as a student is completely different than your licensed pharmacist experience as a resident. So your focus has to be on what's going on right now. And what I see is these kind of generalizations, and you can't have that. And I'll talk about actually matching that directly in point 3. But the first thing is we need to be in the here and now. What are you working on now with your research? It probably should relate to it. So in PGY-1 application, it was okay to have maybe a study that had little to do with the PGY-1. For example, let's say you said, in the future you wanted to do critical care, and your study is on ambulatory care. All they cared about was that you know what an IRB is, that you know how to do peer review, you understand what peer-reviewed literature is, you understand the research process, and then they'll teach you. But now, if you're moving on, there is a real expectation that you're going to have a bit of a focus, because it is a PGY-2. You're narrowing the funnel. Okay, so it's not uncommon for there to be 8 to 10 PGY-1 and then 1 or 2 PGY-2 positions. It's a real tight funnel. The second thing is an unfocused career goal. It was okay. I really don't recommend it, but if they made sense together, it would be okay to say, I'm interested in community or ambulatory care. Those are kind of related. I'm interested in mental health and geriatrics. Those can be related. To say something like, I'm interested in ID or critical care or cardiology, now you're getting to the point of, well, you probably should have just said acute care and then worried about your specialty later. But for PGY-2, you can't flounder with, well, I'm going to apply to ID sites and critical care sites and cardiology sites. Well, which is it? As a PGY-2, you're looking for board certification. And the easiest way to know if you're making a mistake is if you're crossing the board certification streams that don't make sense. Now, Sometimes it would make sense where you're going to see double board certification, for example, BCACP for ambulatory care and BCGP for geriatrics. That would make sense. Okay. Or pharmacotherapy and AmCare, or which is pharmacotherapy if you want to think of it as hospital, ambulatory care, a little more hospital, clinic, and community. But they need to go together. They can't be unfocused, and maybe the word would have been disparate. That is, they're not related. The third thing is, if your residency rotations don't match to the new site in the letter of intent, and just in general, the letter of intent should make it clear, okay, I have done a PEDS 1, a PEDS 2, a NICU, and maybe you have an ambulatory care, and you're talking about things like asthma and juvenile onset arthritis. Maybe you're talking about some apnea in the NICU, but everything needs to match. It all needs to be kind of pediatrics. Okay? But when you look at the new site, you're going to see they're going to have core rotations and they're going to have elective rotations. You need to look closely at those core rotations, because if they have multiple ICUs and you're doing ambulatory care, you're not going to be ready for PGY-2. Most people like PGY-2 a lot better than PGY-1, because PGY-1, if you want to think of your undergrad, it's having to take classes in chemistry and biology and English and math and history and many areas that you're not quite as interested in. PGY-2 is the opposite. It's harder in terms of the challenge, but it's so much more aligned with what you want that it makes it a lot easier in that way. So what you're really looking at when you're looking at a PGY-2, you really have to match your core rotations and your electives in your PGY-1, and they need to be foundational for PGY-2. So if PGY-2 is critical care, they're going to expect that you are already in multiple ICUs, whether the PICU, the MICU, cardiac intensive care, whatever it is. But those are going to have to match. And then your research really should, unless you can make the case that the institution dictated what your research had to be on, your research should be on whatever you're going to do in PGY-2. And that's going to help you also with the interview. Number 4 is a narrow geographic search. So as you were going to PGY-1, maybe you were getting married, maybe you were building a relationship, maybe even in PGY-1, you're in different states. My wife and I were distanced for 2 or 3 years, where I was in Baltimore, she was in Iowa, and it was brutal because there was no Southwest in Iowa. I had to go to Omaha, drive 2 hours, and we just got to the point, let's just meet in St. Louis and watch Cardinals-Cubs games, or let's just meet in Arizona. And it was kind of cool, no kids and dating, then engaged, then married, and we were able to kind of make the best of it. Okay? And she had a lot going on with school and stuff, and I had a real estate practice at the time. But you want to narrow, if you have a narrow geographic search, then there are going to be lots of, well, can I maybe fit this in and things like that. And so the PGY-2s are going to be a sort of fit or a soft fit. Whereas if you had a greater geographic search, really the perfect PGY-2 with regards to culture, maybe it's in a different part of the Deep South or a different part of New England, where it really does fit in. Okay. The fifth thing is not recognizing that many fewer applicants, means the materials are going to get read more thoroughly. So you have to step up your CV and LOI to match. Now, it's understandable you're going to make that letter of intent match, and that's part of what I do. Is the number one mistake I see in letters of intent is that they're trying to make the case that they are the best applicant, and that's not complete. When you're making this case, you need to make the case that you are the best applicant for that site. And that means you need to match. Hey, you guys are a level 1 trauma center. I've been in the ICU. You guys are known for your ambulatory care clinics. I've done 2 ambulatory care clinics and have a ton of community pharmacy experience. You guys have a PGY-2 in psych, and you have a geriatric population. I've been working in nursing homes, I've been working at the VA, and so forth. So the LOI matches beautifully. But now your CV has to match. And this is something that maybe people don't change. Is, oh, well, I put in my rotations. Okay, right. But it has to be relevant rotations. They expect to see the PEDS rotations first. If PEDS is in fall and in spring, well, those probably need to be put together at the top because the order is incorrect. You want to put all the ones that match to theirs, and likely in the order that they present them on their website would be a better way to do it. I looked at your website. Here are core preparation. Here are elective preparation. And here are just electives that neither relate to the core or the elective. And this is something that when I see it done right, it looks so good. So to reiterate, the 5 reasons PGY-2 applicants fail is 1, they look at past accomplishments rather than what they're doing now and what they're going to do in the spring. 2, they have an unfocused career goal. It's ID or critical care or cardiology. When you really want to present one, yes, you can have a career in one of all 3 later. But when you're presenting to a PGY-2, your career goal needs to be very focused. And there's nothing that can't say that you have an interest in the other 2, but you must make clear which one is your top, and that should match. Number 3 is the unmatched residency rotations and research to the new site and the letter of intent. Just saying I did these rotations and I helped these people is not enough. You need to say, look, I've done PEDS 1 and 2. I recognize that 5 of your core residency PGY-2s are going to be in PEDS. And yes, maybe I'm missing some NICU experience that I should have. Maybe COVID prevented that from happening. But you need to make clear, look, I've looked at your website. I'm not just saying I'm going to throw a dart at all the PGY-2s and pediatrics. I'm just going to throw a dart at all the pediatric or all the cardiology residencies, whatever it is. What I'm going to do is I'm going to match one at a time every single core and every single elective and at least look at them, at least recognize and acknowledge. And you say, well, there's no way I could fit that in one page. Well, that kind of goes to point number 5, which I'll get back to, but that you can do a 1.5 to 2 pager because there's more time to read it. It's not this mad flurry of 200 to 300 people. There just aren't as many people applying for the PGY-2. But you are now competing with a much higher group, a much better group, because this is a residency trained group. The next thing is the narrow geographic search. If you can expand the geographic search, great. Again, it's one of those, well, it's only a year, but the issue that you have is that many times the PGY-2, you're going to hope possibly that you end up getting a job there. Now, PGY-2s tend to be a little bit better in terms of getting a job, and still even in the bit of saturated market, you'll still see some of these PGY-2s are really hard to find, oncology PGY-2s and things like that. And so you have a great market. But if you can expand your geographic search, that's ideal. And the last thing is that both need to be stepped up. You can't just do this as, okay, well, I just got to get it done and just get it in. Please, please use my service for the LOI to make sure that we're taking a good approach to this, because the PGY-2 is so much different. You're now a pharmacist talking to a colleague. This colleague sure is going to be board certified in whatever PGY-2 you want, likely. We did have the kind of very cool thing that there is an emergency medicine preceptor for a PGY-2 in emergency medicine. I think it's a PGY-2 in emergency medicine, but she had never done an emergency medicine PGY-1. And it was just that her experience was so good that she could, provide this program. But there's many fewer applicants. So there's nothing in the PGY-1 is going to make you a better writer. You'll be good at notes, you'll be good at communicating and those things, But writing this English for special purposes, where you're creating rhetorical arguments and ethos and logos and pathos and making sure that the evidence follows the thesis, that you have good paragraphing, connecting the paragraphs 1 to 2, 2 to 3, that the top paragraph kind of encompasses everything, the bottom paragraph closes or summarizes. All of those things need to feel like a very complete letter. And the whole I want to express my interest thing, it's kind of pedantic to use something like that when you're stepping up to this next level. So these are the 5 reasons you fail. Again, when we work together on that letter of intent, it kind of solves a lot of these things, because what you've done is you've put in writing, okay, now I have my PGY-1 accomplishments and rotations. Now I have a focused career goal in writing. Now I have taken the time to match the residency rotations and research and match it to the site. Now I've determined that this geographic search is not big enough. I'm going to have to go a bit wider. And I now have a document that is at the level of expectation where someone who reads every single word is going to have every single word count. It's not going to be these amorphous, gross generalizations about wanting to move the profession forward, about wanting to be working at the top of your license. Okay? That's kind of assumed if you're going to PGY-2. You don't have to say it. So again, I want to help you. You can go to residency.teachable.com/P/extreme LOI, and I'll be happy to work with you to give you a shot at the PGY-2 you really want. Yeah, it's true. You're going to match to one of them probably. The chances are 7 out of 10 if you get an interview. But in terms of getting the one you want, especially if it's quite a bit competitive, you're really going to want to make sure you step up your CV and LOI.